Welcome to Awaken Empower TV. I'm your host, Ethann Fox. Today I have a very special guest, Laura Magdalene Eisenhower, who will be joining me in just one moment. But first, let me tell you a little bit about her, and then we'll bring her on the show. Laura is a galactic historian, global alchemist, cosmic mythologist, and is the great-granddaughter of Dwight David Eisenhower. She is on a profound mission to reveal our true origins connected with the Magdalene and Gaia-Sophia energies of love, wisdom, and works to liberate us from the military-industrial complex, the Archonic systems, and false power structures. These forces connect many dots that are coming into our awareness now more than ever, as our solar system has aligned with the galactic plane in 2011 and 12. While residing and traveling independently in over 20 cities in the US and abroad, she developed an excellent knowledge base in frontier health, exopolitics, alchemy, metaphysics, and ancient history, and also has degrees and certifications in science, wilderness expedition leadership, and natural healing and building. She has masterfully woven together the esoteric and alchemical aspects of nature with our ancient roots, hidden history, and the present world, and our future potential. She's also a whistleblower and has been speaking out about being recruited to go to a colony on Mars that represented a timeline that she refused to go along with. She has been able to uncover some necessary truths and agendas that humanity is being kept in the dark about, and lectures and does workshops on these issues, along with topics such as global alchemy, Christ-Sophia, sacred union, ET races, esoteric cosmology, the positive timeline, and seeks to empower individuals so that harmony can be restored. Hi, Laura. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you again. It's been, I think, almost a couple of years since I saw you out here in Michigan, in the U.S., and we haven't spoken since then, at least not at length. And what I'd like to know, now this is a different audience than the original interview that we did, and so for their benefit, for those who may not know who you are, can you give us a little bit of background about your life journey, other than what's in your bio, which I've already read, your life journey from childhood, and I know you've got a lot of interesting family background also that is fascinating, and how that carried you to the work that you're doing now, and any interesting or fascinating life-changing experiences that might have happened along the way that compelled you in this direction or that had a big impact on your journey.
Oh, awesome. Well, I want to first thank you so much for having me, and it's great to see you again. Yeah, I've had a very interesting journey. My awareness of my mission started at a very young age. I just had a very expanded perspective that seemed to take me into dimensions beyond the one that I was born into. And I know that's very typical of children, but there is a lot about how to step up to participating on the world stage on a level that I knew was going to be somewhat dangerous, and that being related to Eisenhower and feeling his presence as a child, and starting to understand his the history, his presidency, and a lot of the different things that have followed him along the way, like ET, government treaties, and all sorts of things. As I was growing into a deeper understanding of my mission, I saw how much it included all of that. But as a child, for me, it was more about the balance of the masculine and feminine, the state of things on Earth, really questioning, why are there animals that are going extinct? Why is there, such mistreatment of the planet? And I understood that there was an imbalance, of course, and there was massive programmings, and I could really feel that matrix energy. I spent so much time in nature that it was so easy to see the distinction. And I just really couldn't understand, like, if it's just simple imbalance, maybe patriarchy, how it could be so abusive. So there must be something more. And so I was watching and observing the Eisenhower family and a lot of information about him that's not the type of stuff we see in history books, and started to get really interested in extraterrestrials. And I also had a very interesting visitation when I was a child that was helping me to see timelines, and the positive timeline, the organic ascension timeline, and what it means in the window period that we're actually in right now. So I almost feel like my whole life has prepared me for this particular window period. basically, it's a stellar activation cycle between the years of 2000 and 2017. And right in the middle there is that prophesized date 2012. And I understood my mission based on, and this is over the course of time, based on like the Venus transits and what the Mayans understood, and the heart of the divine feminine, which is in men and women, and a part of the consciousness of this planet, of course, because, you know, this planet is an unconditionally loving planet, even though it doesn't seem that way, because nature, you know, has its hostility, and then we have, you know, the matrix stuff. It's all a part of alchemy and just the way things go through these cycles of death, rebirth, regeneration, and it's like all a part of what's within our soul. You know, just like there's animal spirits and the elements of earth, air, fire, water within us, the nature is like an outer reflection of that. And so I never felt the harshness of nature. My background was in wilderness education, wilderness expedition leadership, actually. So I got really used to scorpions and rattlesnakes and, you know, high temperatures and 30 below temperatures, and just really learned to get into really strong communication, you know, with Mother Earth, and how to navigate the diversity of her body and survive and thrive. And I realized that was sort of a prerequisite for this other path. Well, it's connected, and it has to do with really awakening that divine blueprint and understanding the hidden agendas that are going on. You know, like, what is the military industrial complex really? And what is the dark agenda? What is it rooted in? What is it all about? And as I got the information part, I started to connect it with the more mythical and the more soulful part of my life, which involved going into the labyrinth, which was a 20-year journey basically in the underworld. And I wrote a book about it that I'm going to be publishing soon. And that was the most significant thing ever, because it was almost like living a double life. It's like I completely exited the earth plane and my body for so long that I had to really strategize how to keep my body alive while I was going through all these gateways and going through all these different passages, where on a physical level, I would also run into like gatekeepers or archetypes that represented almost like the seals or frequency fences in our own DNA that are preventing us from expanding into our multidimensional body. And so I think a lot of us notice on a spiritual path, I mean, there's psychic attacks, there's all sorts of astral entities and all sorts of things that we end up finding along the way, but it helps us to purge what's deep within us, and it helps us to purify the mother womb and clear all this stuff out of it so that we can really be in our power and assist the planetary body in its ascension, because it's seeded as an ascension planet. And that same seeding is within our DNA, and it's linked. Our DNA is linked with the stargates on Earth. So I would say the most significant thing, life-changing, I mean, I'm still kind of going through it. Like every day I'm just wowed at the intensity. Every day feels epic, like the Lord of the Rings, like the battle of, you know, dark and light or good and evil. And I just try and remain centered in myself, understanding, you know, we are made of dark and light. The programmings of the matrix has a lot more to do with good and evil. But if we step away from that duality and we look at the polarity within us, you know, that's how we can begin to create alchemy and find our wholeness again. And so I had a lot of very, very traumatic experiences that, and similar to the wilderness expedition stuff that was much friendlier, that gave me some incredible survival skills. And it taught me everything about energy and thoughts and how we can access our miracle vibration and access real magic to create all sorts of things and manifest all sorts of things, because the universe is abundant. But when we're in fear and when we're locked up into worrying about what others think and we're sort of walking around constricted, it's very easy for us to take on those programmings and almost enable these dark agendas. And so there's a major distinction, and that's where the timelines come in, an artificial timeline, the positive organic ascension timeline. I could get into stories along the way, but that's pretty much my mission, is to create global alchemy. I call myself a global alchemist. And it's to walk with the Venus transits and to help to remind people of these deeper initiations, so that when they're going through a death cycle, which leads to rebirth and transformation, or they're going through a breakdown, which inevitably allows one to really have a breakthrough that connects them with spirit, it's a beautiful growth, but we're not taught how to handle it in our culture. We're actually taking advantage of for that discomfort and that misunderstanding of what those energies are trying to help us with. Because the universe and Gaia is ascending us and helping us with that, but if we don't understand it, then we might run to the doctor or go on medication or think we're going crazy. But these initiations are powerful, so that's what I want to help people with, so that we don't distract ourselves away from the incredible growth that's available.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot of communication from people all around the world, especially recently, who are going through a lot of personal struggles and transformation. Now, I know you're also quite skilled in astrology, as I've studied it for quite a while too. And so can you comment a little about what you said about helping people with these transitions through these energies, and what's been happening just in the past year? And we've had an eclipse earlier this March, and we have one coming up in September. And is there any significance of those in terms of the transformation that people are going through?
Yes, and there's a lot about the different alignments that are happening during the eclipse. The eclipses, the eclipse energy lasts for about 6 months, and when we really focus in on our dreams and our visions, and I'm using this term now because I really like it. When we put our dreams and visions into our internal GPS, making sure that we know exactly what it is we want to manifest and we don't let anything else in, we're capable of manifesting pretty much anything. And so during an eclipse time is a great opportunity to make those statements to ourselves. And during an eclipse, because of the nature of the way everything's lining up, it just gives us a much longer period of time to work with that compared to a new moon, which is usually just, the month. The biggest significance, I would say, is the Uranus-Pluto transits that finally wrapped itself up in March. That was really intense. We're still feeling the effects of it, but not like we have been. And that's really, these are the planets that are helping to upgrade us and also provide us those transformations, which have to do with the initiations we were talking about. Chiron is another one that I pay a lot of attention to because it's a part of the asteroid belt. And the asteroid belt's an exploded planet from our galactic history. And so when we work with the asteroids, it can help us to connect with our galactic consciousness. But Chiron's a tough one because it's all about the wounds and injuries and afflictions. And it's very easy to almost feel like a victim to it or just feel the suffering and pain of it all. But when we recognize it as an opportunity to remind ourselves that we're actually homesick and we're just looking to pull something in that we've lost contact with, then we can use that adversity to expand us and to help us to move into that portal of galactic consciousness, because I feel that our wounds and injuries give us an idea of exactly what we're here to heal. And it's a great way to figure out what our mission is. Take the greatest thing that's ever harmed you or caused you the greatest of suffering and make that the thing that you're going to embrace and nurture and find the wisdom behind. And then when you share it with others, you're going to raise them out of the confusion that you might once have been in. And this is how we can each be leaders, is to just give those parts of us the attention it deserves. And then it has that ripple effect to anybody that might be going through something similar. And then it's like we move through that portal together, and then we truly transform and heal those wounds, and we heal the fragmentation of that exploded planet, which is both Tiamat and Maldek. So we've had a lot of that actually this week on the new moon in Gemini. We had a major challenging aspect from Chiron, and I've been having a lot of fun with that this week. It's been really wild. But yeah, I love to work with astrology because it's the language of that individual that we get to give back to them. It's like giving a person their own information and wisdom and potential. And it can activate things that have been dormant, because sometimes people aren't utilizing the wholeness of all that they are. And I mostly read people. I can't think of a chart that I've seen that doesn't have the potential to be an avatar or fully in the Christ consciousness or that goddess energy. Everybody's got the ability to be there, but it's funny how the slightest splinter or wound or affliction can keep us wrapped up in something that completely keeps us from it. So I like to kind of give it a little ping and open that door up to help to liberate them from the zodiac if possible, because we are moving into the galactic, and we're moving into higher earth energies now.
Speaking a little about Chiron, Chiron's been in Pisces for a little while, and I was actually born with Chiron in Pisces. What do you think is the significance of that happening at this particular time in our experience?
Well, we have Neptune going retrograde, so there's a lot about going inward. And with Chiron and Pisces, it has a lot to do with healing any wounds that are connected to maybe invalidations of our higher self or our spiritual energies when we were young. It depends on the aspects in a chart. It might be somebody who is on a path to assist in the healing of our spiritual bodies as a calling. It might be that there was a lot of invalidation and wounding to our consciousness or our gifts and abilities, kind of like a child who talks about angels and fairies and ETs, and the parents are like, just be quiet, we don't want to hear that. And then all of a sudden it's like they get all internalized. And it's also connected to being able to let go and have more faith and embrace the journey and allow ourselves to expand in the larger picture and where our wounds are that prevent us from doing it, because we might slip into survival, we might slip into anxiety when we fear the unknown because something might be happening that doesn't feel so safe or positive. It gives us the opportunity to heal the parts of ourselves that are blocked from that miracle energy or our own personal magic, so that we don't stay in survival and anxiety, which only invites more chaoticness. And it's perfect right now, especially with the new moon in Gemini, because having it articulated and people sharing information that is all about unification and how we're expanding together and really walking, the spiritual journey together without the religious overlays or the new age deceptions, but just the love and compassion and mutual respect. That's completely the ultimate spiritual vibration. I just feel us all healing that part of ourselves together.
Now, you were just recently at Contact in the Desert, right? I think?
Yes.
And you're going to be at the Isetti Ranch, I believe, was it August?
Yes, August 14th, 15th, and 16th.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a weekend event with Dr. Dream and I, and we'll both be doing big workshops. We'll be doing a galactivation. We'll be doing the Inner Divines, which talks about the inner masculine and feminine, which is fun because we do it together. And we skywatch, we explore the land, and we really connect with people and really bring them into the participation so that it's a really like a group experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I really recommend people going because there's great camping and the deal is good. So you can find that on our website.
Yeah, James was just on my show a couple of weeks ago. And so have you been to the ranch before?
Yes, we did the same sort of event last year. Mm-hmm. And then I did a larger event where there were other guests. We both did a larger event with a bunch of other speakers, I think 2 years back.
Now, were you able to observe any extraterrestrial craft while you were there the last time or last times?
We definitely saw all sorts of things in the sky. And the question is, okay, well, what exactly is that? The things that sort of blip in and out and sort of bounce around the sky seem to be the UFOs. Of course, what I've heard is the percentages is 80% are piloted by ETs and 20% are military. I think that's correct. And yes, I mean, there's a lot coming off of that mountain. You can just see things go in and out. And it's a major vortex zone. And so people observe all sorts of wild things. The orbs are incredible. People, see fairies and all sorts of stuff. And I definitely was tapping into some of that myself, definitely feeling the energy and the presence of all sorts of elementals and just really high energy at that place.
And how do you know the difference between a UFO and a government craft? How can you tell the distinction?
I think the UFOs that are extraterrestrial are the ones that are blipping around because they're capable of jumping into other dimensions and coming back in. And I don't think that the humans or the military that are piloting those crafts quite have that ability. I mean, because the advanced extraterrestrials, the UFOs are part of their body. I mean, their DNA is connected to the craft. The back-engineered UFOs, just that we might connect with, like maybe the grays, they're not really like the higher extraterrestrial energies. And I'm not saying all grays are like this, but, when you're dealing with something that's part of the collaborations of ET government, that's much closer to the physical in order to make real contact and, do abductions. We're dealing with Maya labs, like military abductions. And I think it's just an inner knowing, or just the flight patterns are just different. And the thing is, if they were legitimate ETs, which some of the Greys are to a certain degree, because some of the Nordics ended up getting engineers into the tall whites, which are considered close to Greys, the shape. Each species has a different type of craft that has a specific shape. We see the triangle ones, we see the ones that, just have like a distinct shape, maybe like a pear or just a disc. And there's actually a great thing that people can Google, and I can't quite remember the website, but it talks about all the different ET races and the types of crafts that are associated with those races. But back to the Greys, some have been in breeding programs. Some of them are just automations, and they're kind of being run by military, and some are future humanoids that time traveled from the future to come in and pick up their genetic material or warn us about where their path ended up taking them. And I believe that most of the back engineer crafts are from the future humanoid Greys that are in places like Area 51. And I think those are the type that are mostly piloted by military as far as the appearance. But I don't think they're able to blip around unless they have those time traveling capabilities, or they're with one that does that. It's kind of a mystery.
Now, let's back up to your own history. You were once asked to be involved in the Mars program, was it?
Yes.
And can you elaborate on that? What that was about, and what came out of that, and also maybe transition from there into where are we in terms of government space technology at this point compared to what is shown to us in the mainstream?
Okay, so I always felt there was some weird attention on me when I was young. It felt like some form of weaponry. I didn't quite know how to describe it. And it actually is what made it so difficult to be grounded. And so I was like, if I can't be in my body, I'm going to go on this journey because I need to go on it anyway, because it's something I think I've done in a past life before. And I think we all do it to a certain degree, go into the underworld and the dark night of the soul type stuff. But I always felt this control on me. It's like everything I tried to ever create for myself got sabotaged, or it didn't end up working out. So I was thinking, okay, this is me. This is my problem. I'm doing something wrong. I got to figure it out. I did a lot of inner work. I went to a clairvoyant institute. I kind of stumbled upon it, and they helped me to understand that this attention on me had nothing really to do with me. But I believe we're all connected, and there is, something that I needed to develop within myself to counteract it. But they said, it wasn't coming from my internal world. It was coming as an attack. And so I kind of let it strengthen me, and that's kind of how I worked with it. But they noticed that no matter what I did, it didn't matter. It's not negative karma at all. They just said they have their attention on you, and they said that I would have to become senior to these lower forces. And that's a lot about what we do when we battle just anything that is of a lower consciousness or nature, and anything that's controlling is. And so I finally gave up. I couldn't take the control anymore. I'm like, all right, I'm going to just see where all this takes me, because I can't move past it. I want to face what it is, and I just sort of let go. And I ended up moving back to the DC area from California, where I was before, and ended up living with my mom, single parenting twins that were, I don't know, maybe 6 years old at the time. And I was very reclusive, and I'm like, okay, I need to just go out and do something. And so I made a plan, and when I went out to this gathering a couple hours away, this man approached me, and it seemed like we were meeting in a normal way, just kind of like, hey, what's up, what's happening? And there was a familiar energy between us that made it very easy to connect, and we just ended up talking for hours and hours and hours, and next thing you know, we are seeing each other. And when he would come visit me in DC, he would be going to these secret meetings, and he would come back and he would just give me little tidbits about it. And then finally, he really started to tell me a lot more. And it had to do with going to Mars in 2012. And we'd be taking these crafts called ARCs, spelled A-R-C. And he was working with this group of people that had code names like penguin, eagle. Well, actually, he was golden eagle, owl, Chicken Little, all these names of like an animal. And it was this sort of think tank, or just group that he said were interested in UFOs and extraterrestrials. And And they were part of collaborating with him to go to Mars. And I never got to meet these people directly, so I was writing down their names, and I was, all curious about it. And it wasn't until 6 months into the relationship I found out that he was sent specifically to that location where I went to the gathering to pull me in. I just thought, okay, I'm seeing this person, I'm dating this person that's going out to these secret meetings. He wants to go to Mars, but I don't have to go, and this is his deal, and maybe he'll be inspired to be on Earth with me while I do my mission, or that group will be open to my thoughts about how we need to take care of this planet, and I'll just be a part of the discussion. And it was nothing like that. I actually noticed that he had really weird behavior. He would get phone calls and disappear for days. He called one of the people a handler, and then I was like, okay, I really need to figure out who these people are. But it didn't get really heavy until I actually moved to live with him. And then I'm in North Carolina. And then it was like, you're going, and if you don't go, they're going to take you anyway. And that was before I found out that he was sent specifically to the gathering to find me. And so I had some prophetic dreams that really helped me to understand what this was all about. I was given a choice in my dream. You can go off with them and be controlled by them. And I was in this craft when that information was coming to me, or you can stay on Earth and do your mission. And I was like, well, of course I'm going to stay on Earth. The next thing you know, I fell out of this ship and I was in the water, and this alignment of planets happened and the sky just turned really light. And so at that point I was completely on to the fact that I got to find out more, and I got to get out of this, because I made my choice and they're being rather aggressive, or at least he is as the spokesperson, and his behavior is really weird. And so I started to research their names, and I wasn't really finding anything. I was seeing stuff about remote viewing. I was seeing stuff about where a lot of people with abduction stories or who have seen UFO report to them and give them the information. But just to make a long story short, what I ended up finding out was, after about 2 weeks of tracking their names and just going from website to website, linking to people that they knew to just try and find something out, because I knew something was up. Because I sensed that what my partner was experiencing was artificial telepathy, and that his abduction experience, which I forgot to mention, had something to do with them. And they yanked him in, into their circle after they knew that he was having those experiences. And the telepathy he was getting was about this Mars mission. And so he was saying that, oh, I'm working with them, and I was getting from what I was feeling their agenda was, this is when I started to understand my labs, that they created some sort of abduction scenario, maybe implanted him with something, and he's getting artificial telepathy about going off planet. And I had no Project Camelot. I had no colleagues in the field. I had nothing to compare it to. And I'm just like, what is this? This is absolutely freaking crazy. And so I finally discovered that these names were associated with psychotronic weaponry, mind control, my labs, and all the things that I was suspicious of. And so I really yanked myself out. It wasn't until 2010 that somebody actually put out a website about them and listed all those things. But until then, I was only finding bits and pieces where I would see a name association with some of those things, even weather modification and all sorts of stuff, that they have a link to that. I discovered that they are actually a part of MJ12. MJ12 is the council that has all the alien technology. And so what this means now, but first off, when I tried to get away from it all, it's almost too long of a story to talk about the struggle that it took to get myself out of it all. I mean, it just got really chaotic. I was being blasted with all sorts of stuff, and the mind control stuff doesn't work on me, and they knew that. That's why they brought in that person to reel me in. And I discovered that they had used quantum access technologies called looking glass technologies to locate us in a past life, so that they could pull in somebody that I already had a natural affinity to, so that I would have an attraction, so I'd have more like a familiarity. And because if it was just anybody, I wouldn't probably, be that drawn into it. And so these quantum access technologies are able to look into the future as well. And I discovered that they're not able to see anything past 2012, which gave me even more reason to say, hey, we're going to create this. And I already know about the fact that this planet's an ascension planet. And I know that there's no way I'm going to be able to help humanity if I'm on Mars. And first of all, nothing's going to rip me away from Mother Earth, because it's like, this planet's my everything. And if anybody gets trouble because I'm creating it like with feminine terms, it's completely in union with the masculine, but it's just, we call her Mother Earth and Gaia. So I got away from it all. And it wasn't until 2010 that Alfred Weber found me, linked me to Andrew Basiago. And Andrew Basiago said that in Project Pegasus, they had pre-identified me before birth, that I would be working with him and bringing out a lot of the Mars information. And so what ended up happening is the Mars agenda was set up in the Eisenhower administration, and it had to do with some of this ET government contact. And what I've come to discover is that the Mars agenda got infiltrated. And instead of it being about protecting the human genome and protecting our DNA in the event of a catastrophe, it was more about creating a breakaway civilization, hoarding all the technologies, because the elitists and I think dark extraterrestrials have got involved when we think of Montauk and the Project Paperclip with the Nazi scientists that came in, who are time traveling and tinkering with everything. They really got a foothold on this. And the agenda now is about creating New World Order, having a breakaway civilization where they have their condos on Mars, they have all these advanced technologies, and we're living, not as ascended beings, but enslaved in New World Order. There's also the potential that they would create extinction to kind of clear the planet and come back and seed it the way they want to. And so all this is so incredibly offensive to me. So the fire in me was just full voltage, zero fear at all. And I was just I am so ready to take this down. And that's really a huge part of my mission, is to expose all of it, to work with the energetics of Mars and Venus, knowing that we're made of that energy, to bring the ego of ourself into alignment with the heart, because that's going to help to expose the agenda. Because as within, so without, as above, so below, but as below, so above. I mean, we can change things around here to change the galactic wars that have been happening for so long, and not be the inheritors or the ones that are manipulated, but be the empowered ones and start to wake up our DNA and see why they're so freaking threatened by us. And most of it is because they compromised their DNA and they need us to feed on, because they lost their connection to spirit. And they also, just want control, which is the whole reason it ever began.
So how advanced is our technology in terms of space technology? I mean, from what we see in mainstream news, we have the space shuttle and things like that, but how far along is that technology? We talked earlier about some of the UFO craft, but maybe you can elaborate on that a little.
Well, from what I understand, I haven't had access other people like Andrew Basiago, who's time traveled and teleported. They have teleportation technologies, which is almost like an elevator, and it can get you off planet into another planet in no time at all. And the time travel, is based on Tesla technology. Most of this stuff is actually, and it's difficult to comprehend, because we ask ourselves, how could that really be possible? We have to consider that the gray alien technology is able to simulate environments that don't even exist. And what they're attempting to do, and I'm not saying this is Project Pegasus, because Andrew would have to be the one to speak on that, is sort of construct an artificial timeline based on creating synthetic environments that don't really exist, to rewrite history in order to be able to kind of photograph it and track it and make it almost like a reality. And it's an imitation of the original creation, but it's manipulated just enough to keep us in belief systems that really don't serve us. It's manipulating the war stories. It's manipulating the Christ story. It's manipulating the future trajectory. And so they use the Armageddon propaganda to keep us locked into it. And 9/11 was a huge part of that. And part of that propaganda has to do with how they're utilizing HAARP and weather modification to create superstorms and to simulate disasters that aren't natural. And so once we wake up to the programming, we are completely free of that timeline. And so it's nothing to be scared of. And I know it all sounds like really alarming information for people hearing it for the first time, but once you wake up to the game, and you don't have to have it fully figured out, because I don't think any of us are going to fully have it figured out, then your creative energy isn't plugged into it anymore, and you're plugged into Gaia and the ascension. And I guess, I'm glad you asked this question, because this is really what it's about for me, is unplugging people from the matrix, or, they have to be willing, but giving them an idea of, the difference between the two, and, going into what's organic. The advanced technologies, when we're talking gray alien technology, is very dangerous to our multidimensional experience. It's definitely something we have to watch out for, because as they promote a transhumanism agenda, and as the nanoparticles from chemtrails get into our bodies, and they're trying to, plug us into the artificial intelligence systems, we have to be very careful of government disclosure, and also where they have all these scientific breakthroughs and all these technologies that are introduced to heal the environment. We have to make sure it's not the beings that destroy the environment coming in as the saviors, like the leaders of our country do when they're fighting the war on terror. And we know that a lot of them had something to do with 9/11. And so I encourage people to not look to the governments for disclosure, but to look at us, what we're bringing to the table, just all the different stories people have, and, the different researchers, and some, channelers that are good out there, which there are, and some, might be being manipulated. But the best thing we can do is do that inner work and go on those inner journeys, because it helps us to have better intuition and discernment, and it helps us to be so strong in who we are that it's very hard to lead a person astray that's coming from that place within, and to not externalize everything so much, because there are massive manipulations, and it's based on these technologies. They have agents that can disappear. They wear these belts and you can't even see them, but you can see their footprints, people have said. We're dealing with like Star Trek, Star Wars technologies. They have the ability to regrow limbs. There's super soldiers that have fought battles that have had their limbs blown off and grown back, just like that. They can pretty much cure anything too. And so, yeah, they're hoarding everything, and they have an agenda, and it's using millions and millions of our tax dollars to fund. And there's unbelievable criminal activity that's going on beneath the surface to stay in power and to siphon off of our energies. We're the free energy technology that they want. That's why there's these manipulations, because if they can siphon our energy, that's how they power up these dark technologies. And Tesla's technologies were misused, but there is gray alien technology as well. When we're looking at more advanced races, the ones that are more benevolent, they're mostly based on color, sound, and frequency. And they're much more in harmony, of course, with nature and with our bodies. And it has nothing to do with control. It has to do with helping us to regenerate and helping us to purify. And I don't, but there's a lot about what we need to do to step up to the plate to have that level of assistance. Just like when we're maybe having health problems, our immune system isn't going to just make it go away. We have to start to eat well. We have to focus on having just a healthier relationship with life, and nothing's going to do anything for us unless we first step up to the plate. And these are the times where we can get that assistance. We have been assisted for sure, and there are a lot of higher beings out there, but it gets harder and harder for them to help us when we get further and further immersed into the web of these negative ET agendas, which, just to not confuse people, to simplify it, I would call them negative ego beings. They're just out for themselves. They're service to self.
Now, I just, Michael J. Murphy was on the show a few weeks ago, and we're talking about geoengineering and what's taking place there. From your perception, you mentioned geoengineering a few moments ago. What is the purpose of geoengineering, and how is it actually being used, and how is it affecting human beings and basically the earth as a whole?
I would say that it's all about weaponizing nature and weaponizing us. And it's a part of creating that artificial existence, because if they're able to create this artificial timeline and they're able to manipulate history, they are, doing that in present time with our Earth. The nanoparticles and the chemtrails get into our bodies. The geoengineering, is how they're able to steer weather patterns in whatever way that they want. And when weather is a weapon, I mean, this is the most devastating thing, because all of us nature lovers, when you want just the comfort of nature, I mean, and watching nature like begin to be weaponized is a very difficult thing. But we have to understand that we're on a multi-dimensional planet, and it's only this portion of her body that's being compromised. And this portion of her body that's being compromised is a part of that tree of good and evil to allow us to learn and grow and see where we're going wrong. She's just holding the mirror and saying, hey, are you seeing this? This isn't right. What can you guys do with your free will to get on track with the truth of what this planetary body is really about? And then the other choice would be to put our heads in the sand, to maybe get yanked into some of these, programmings that give us power and influence that is of a corrupt nature, so that we enable it, because it's easier to join them than because it's, people get tempted into it. But then there's a lot of well-intentioned people that are told that when they fly these planes or when they're, supporting Monsanto, that it's actually helping the planet. A lot of the whistleblowers like Phil Schneider, he was led to believe that his work was to help humanity. When he woke up and discovered he was working for the Dark Cabal and he started to speak about it, they murdered him. And so weaponizing nature and weaponizing us, when it's weaponizing us, it could be anything from getting something out of your smartphone, like getting something activated, then all of a sudden, if that person's unstable, because you have to be pretty unstable, all of a sudden that person might, do something criminal. Or we notice with the smart meters and the amount of manipulations, the frequency manipulations going on, a lot of relationships are targeted. I walk into my house after going out of town because we tried to get rid of the smart meter. I have something on top of it to neutralize it, but it's just like the energy. It's just like, it's so much easier for everybody to just feel like a little bit tense. And it's to prevent us from being able to expand. Our ascension and unification is the biggest threat to them. But if they have the remote control on nature and us, then they feel they're in the driver's seat, but they haven't succeeded and they're not going to. And that I firmly feel is that we've gone through some very difficult periods in the last couple of years. And I feel like we've gotten over every hurdle and hump and have been able to call out every false flag, and that the information that's being spread that's keeping them unable to completely dupe the masses is very powerful and strong. And the numbers are increasing of people who are open to this sort of information.
You mentioned earlier on that it's not possible to control you using a lot of these technologies. Why is that? And is that exclusive to you, or is it something that's happening with a lot more people as consciousness is awakening?
I don't think it's exclusive to me at all. I think anybody can be there, at any time. There is, we all have our past lives and the things that we've been doing for a long time that have prepared us for this shift that we're in right now. And I've had so many attempts to manipulate me and control me that I let it smarten me. I let it serve me. I let it help me to get more intelligent. If I felt an attack or something trying to control me, I had such an easy way to know that it wasn't my energy because I'd spent so much time in nature that it's like, this doesn't feel right. This isn't me. And if we have boundaries and if we don't allow it in, nothing can get to us. If we're locked into a television, if we are all about the news and we are believing everything about the matrix and we're voting, presidents into office. I'm not saying everybody who votes for a president is susceptible, but we're basically signing a contract saying, I agree to be controlled. Because that's what government means. And I've never voted for a president. And coming from the Eisenhower family, which is not an Illuminati family, it just did something to me as a child. Like, it slapped me across the face and it's sort of like, welcome to this reality. Welcome to your mission. And I'm like, can I just hang out with my friends and not be a normal kid? And so I was always sort of on guard for all this sort of stuff because I was aware that some kind of game was being played. I just didn't understand it to the level that I do now. But I was always very watchful and very observing of it all. So that protected me because I was able to tell the difference. And I think it just sneaks up on people and gets the best of them. But I think, any of us who do enough meditation or spend enough time in nature or really commit to that inner journey, mind control can't work on you. So it's certainly not exclusive to me. And I think, there might have been times where I was put into a lot of survival and I had a hard time finding internal peace. But I let every weapon they threw at me become a weapon against them because I let it increase my passion, my fire, my determination, and my perseverance to completely liberate humanity and myself. So they notice everything we throw at her just makes her stronger and makes her more awake. And then I started to feel the weaponry kind of die out. But a lot of it has come through people. There's been so many plants in my life where somebody will be compromised and they will show up on my path and appear friendly and like a friend, even people that I've formed relationships with. And then all of a sudden they do a complete 180 and they're absolutely possessed and almost robotic. And that's been their tactic. They got kind of sick of trying to just directly attack me. So they send people onto my path because I think they know, I wouldn't call it a weak point, but they know I have a big heart. They know that I see the good in people, and then I give everyone a chance. So it's like, perfect idea. And that kicked my butt for years and years and years. And I took it very personally, and then I really realized, these people are being manipulated. I'm not one to go and blame something outside of myself immediately. And that's why I'm like, okay, I got to look at what's going on here. Why did I attract this? And when I started to understand the rest of it, it's like, okay, it's targeting, but I still have inner work to do to shield myself. Now it's more about shielding, not so much about feeling like, oh my gosh, I have maybe the worst luck on earth. I recognize more that I have to build my auric field. I need to be grounded, which has been the biggest challenge of my life. I'm grounded with nature, but once I get into the matrix energies, it's really difficult. And I just focused more on that. But I mean, I still feel it all the time, And when I do readings for people, I sort of help them to wake up to who they are, because if you know who you are and you're authentic, you can't be controlled. When we fall into the programming and the expectations of society, or we give our power away when we're going through a powerful initiation, or we buy everything that we read in the news and see on TV, then yeah, you're susceptible to mind control. And then of course, there's people that were born into projects that were going through the trauma-based mind control at a young age. And I was never put into those projects. It wasn't until 2006 that this whole sort of shadow government stuff showed up. Even though Eisenhower was aware of all of it, I didn't experience the depths of what his warning was about until I was presented with all of this. And that's when I started to understand the deeper projects like MK Ultra and the Monarch programs, and how they, have sex slaves and have trained assassins, and they use humans to do their dirty work. And it's the most criminal thing that it's so hard to fathom. I still wake up every morning in shock. I can't even believe that anybody would do this to a human, or just a soul, or just anybody, or breed people into these projects to do that. And that's also what I really want to expose more than anything. And yeah, so the best thing, is thinking about our vibration and frequency, because all the manipulations are a low level frequency. And so the whole concept of raising our frequency is just to be around high energy, like laugh a lot more, use essential oils, use tuning forks and crystal bowls, and, play music that is, tuned to like 432 hertz. And just see the bigger picture. This is a very temporary experience. And when we think, Mother Earth is being compromised, we have to remember she's multidimensional. Her gateways to these higher Earth energies did get compromised, particularly when we sank in the lower density from these advanced civilizations of Atlantis and Lemuria. That's when it really all began, where this sort of human path and these timeline things started to take place. But that's when the Mother Goddess seeded the core of this Earth with a 13-dimensional monadic core, which is how this is an ascending planet. It's just we go through life, death, and reincarnation and have amnesia each time, makes us very vulnerable. But it also is so that we learn the right use of power, so that we don't make the same mistakes that we made in these higher civilizations that caused them to collapse. But of course, a lot of people had nothing to do with the reasons they collapsed. That's why a lot of people feel trapped here, or they're like, I'm not from here, why am I here? But, we have to remember, hey, you're a light worker, and you're here to remind people of our greater potential, because that DNA is ready to be turned on. It's in there. It's just dormant.
So I'd like to talk, you touched on bits and pieces of this throughout our whole conversation, but I'd like to, in as brief a way as possible, maybe get a brief history of our Earth and the evolution of consciousness that took place here. I know there are a lot of ideas that are being thrown around out there, the Archons and Anunnaki and all of those. Can you put that all into a simple and short an explanation of the timeline of how all that took place and why?
Yes, and if I pull this off, that'll be awesome. Short and sweet. Okay, so we're in a free will universe, and if we think about the masculine and feminine as one, when it was like one, as we have been in a free will universe, the energy started to differentiate. Also, there's 15 dimensions in this time matrix based on what Galactic science has to say, and channelers like Lisa Renee, who talks to the Guardians, and I've done a lot of research and a lot of inner journeying to really understand this. There's founder races, 3 main founder races that seeded life in the time matrix. There's Harmonic Universe 1, 2, and 3, and Harmonic Universe 2, which is dimensions 4, 5, and 6 is where the planet Terra was, where Tiamat was. And this is where the original Atlantis and Lemuria were. In the higher dimensional energies of Harmonic Universe 3, we've got Gaia. And beyond that, we have the energy matrix or the ascended masters, and then the energy matrix. And what happened was these founder races, some ended up falling or rebelling. And a lot of that goes to the source of it, which is the differentiation of the masculine and feminine, and how the Lucifer energy sort of split off from the father. It's, I mean, one can see it maybe as a child or just a part of that family that just ended up turning into the negative ego, the false light, and ended up sort of convincing, and this we hear about in all sorts of texts, but told in a different way, a lot of these founder races to sort of join in with this, and they ended up digressing. There's the fallen seraphim, which are very reptilian. There's the fallen Elohim, which is connected more to the archons. And when that happened, their agenda was to hybridize with us so that we would lose our connection with source, so that they could be, you know, the creator gods and the ones that we would look to. And anyway, there was a lot of abuse of technology and a lot of galactic wars going on actually between the fallen seraphim and Elohim. And they're still sort of vying for control. They're like the main controller groups on the earth. And so the way I look at it is our masculine and feminine, when it's united, connects to the Christ consciousness. When we're out of balance, then we're in our negative ego. So if we're in a free will universe and the masculine and feminine got out of whack and this negative ego came in and started to influence the beings that were born into the time matrix, then all of a sudden you got things joining in with that and losing connection to the goddess, losing connection to the Christ energy, which was different back in those times. And so the right and left brain was like Atlantis and Lemuria, which suffered as well because of that imbalance, and that's what created the collapse. And then Harmonic Universe 1 fell into, Harmonic Universe 2, dimensions 4, 5, and 6, fell into Harmonic Universe 1, which is dimensions 1, 2, and 3. And that's when we sank in density. And that's when the planetary body was seeded with this ascension 13-dimensional monadic core, so that we would learn right use of power and to make free will choices of whether or not we're going to go with the negative ego or we're going to go with the harmony and balance of the masculine and feminine and reconnect to the Christ energy, to the goddess, and to true source. And so the Anunnaki have a lot of different factions. Some are connected to the goddess and the seeding of the angelic lines and the Holy Grail bloodlines. Then we have like the Enki and Enlil, which are more connected to these timelines that have to do with either, controlling humanity or a pseudo version of liberating humanity, but in actual fact, it ends up enslaving them because the whole hedonistic kind of, you can do whatever you want. Look what Aleister Crowley did with that. He ended up being one of the main people to manifest the the reptilian agenda, which connects to some of the grays that they use. And so it's about not living these extremes, because we have the Yahweh sort of Jehovah Archonic one that's all about law and order, but to the point where people rebel because he's a jealous God. There's no other God before me. He's that demiurge. And then we have the other extreme, which is that Luciferian Satanism, like it's all about us, and we can do whatever we want. And then we see that play out on the world stage with religion and with just the complete and total negation of God. But then we find that religion actually has that satanic component, because as long as we're not in balance, they have control. So it's not about Enki and Enlil. It's about the infiltration of the negative ego that runs through both of those mindsets that ends up creating our inability to be balanced, which is how we're easily controlled. So even though they're considered to be dueling brothers, it all ends up being the same agenda at the end of the day. And so the goddess energy, being really important right now, helps us to reconnect to the Christ consciousness, to the earth, and that rebalancing. And it actually redeems these dueling brothers, and it actually redeems Lucifer, because the whole alchemical thing connected to the Venus transits takes that fallen energy and turns it back up again. And the Venus transits create a perfect pentagram in the sky. And so it's taking the reversals of these sacred symbols and it's turning it upright again, so that matter and physicality isn't our ruler anymore, where we're in survival or we're disempowered, and spirit holds dominion, and we're able to see that we're alchemists and we're magicians and we've got all these great abilities. But if we don't have integrity and we misuse that power, then we're misusing our free will and we stay in that time loop. And so they want to harvest energies, and there's all this other stuff, and it could go on, but I hope that explained it enough.
So you mentioned a lot of different names there, and a lot of different, in terms of the archons. So the archons so they're a lower consciousness, essentially, that is drawing energy from the consciousness of this physical dimension of human beings. Am I on the right track as far as that's concerned?
Well, archons means ruler. And so if you think about it, there's archangels, which are actually a form of archon, and archdemons, which are the darker. So we're in a dark and light duality because of, free will. And the archons, the first fallen energy was the seraphim, and that's connected to Lucifer. The second one had to do with the demiurge, and when Sophia started to participate in the human experience. Gnosticism and some of the texts actually have been altered, and I've been working with a lot of people to get to the truth of these stories. They haven't been ridiculously altered like religion, but it's very patriarchal, and it's very much got that slant to it to kind of demonize the feminine and blame her for everything. Like, she created all the archons, she created the demiurge. But it was, whatever happened was in response to this initial fall. And then when the Archonic system came about, which was next, it's kind of a byproduct of the imbalance of the masculine and feminine. And it's sort of the chaoticness that comes from having light beings and dark beings. And so the dark beings are like the mind parasites. It's like the lower ETs. It's the stuff that attaches to people and exacerbates whatever weakness they might be holding. Kind of like, if we're feeling insecure or we're not in balance, it's very easy for archons to come in and just make it a heck of a lot worse. If we're on a healing path, we might just work with the light beings, the archangels. But then we might ignore our own darkness and not go into the zone of working with our shadow to create a balance between our light and dark. So again, with the extremes, the best thing that we can do is connect with these higher light beings by connecting with our own inner light. And when we connect with the dark beings, let it teach us about our shadow and where we're still weakened or where we're vulnerable to attack and where we need to strengthen ourselves. And the dark is great because once we anchor our energy in the dark, we actually knock out the archonic deception, because it only deceives us when we fear our power and our own darkness. But if we have darkness without the light, then we can't really see maybe our own guidance. But when we integrate it, that's what the crone is all about. She holds the light in the darkness. It's the crone, who navigates the underworld with the inner light. And then when we get back onto the surface where everything's light, if we understand the nature of darkness, we can't be duped. So, and so the archons, the more negative ones, they're byproducts of the 7 ruler archons. And that connects with the chakra system. We have 7 chakras. And so when we go through the 7 chakras and we clear them, we clear the 7 archonic rulers, and then we find the 7 pillars of wisdom, and we create this transformation that allows us to reach our galactic chakras. And so it's all in the chakra system. And that's why some people are like, oh, you got to shut down all your chakras. It's like, well, we got chakras for a reason. We need to just work with them and understand them and see where they're manipulated, and also see where the divine wisdom is. When you see those chakra pictures of the sacred symbols and the ohms and the Sanskrit ones, I mean, there's some incredible stuff there, but they do get easily manipulated by the dark archons.
Mm-hmm. So are you feeling pretty confident at this point that we're heading into a future, or even in the present, where these darker forces or archonic forces, whatever you want to call them, are losing their control over the consciousness of the planet and the human civilization?
I do. I feel it. And I think, we're at a place where we understand the game enough. We call out the game before they even go to the next strategy that they're wanting to use to screw us over. I feel so incredibly good about it. I feel that they're trying all these things. They're like, it's not working. It's not working. There were so many attacks in the last couple months, particularly between November and February. I felt like I wasn't going to make it. And it's, and I know a lot of people felt that way. But it wasn't in a fear place. It was just like, this is just too much. But this is the great thing I learned in the wilderness. We have a will to survive. We have a spark in us that nobody can stop. If we really want to be here and we really want to ascend, we're going to have our deepest soul longing appeased no matter what. But if we don't care, it's not going to help us. I mean, it's our perseverance, it's our desire, it's our passion, it's our mission that is making this happen. And it connects us with something that's already there. But with all the different things that they're trying to do, it's very difficult because we wake up to it every day. We pay bills. We can't all get off the grid and just live that blissful life. I mean, they can target us and find us no matter where we are, for the most part. And what we're learning to do, which is the kind of communication I got early on, we're learning to become senior to these lower forces. And so when we look at chemtrails, when we feel an attack, we have to match it with a higher frequency. So when I look at the chemtrails, I let myself feel empowered. Like, they're doing this because they're threatened by us. So I'm just remembering in that moment that we're incredibly powerful and we can neutralize this. When we expand into our multidimensional bodies by getting to know what's unconscious within us and turning the light on it to expand into more self-awareness, we begin to work on a whole nother level. And the physics of how we heal and deal with energy is completely different. We can transmute and alchemize pretty much any weaponry and assault that's being thrown at us. But if we're in fear, if we're watching the news and we're paying attention to every false flag and we let it, freak us out and drop our energy, or if we are continuing the patterning of the distortions of the masculine and feminine, or, and having imbalanced relationships, or if we're not nurturing ourselves and giving ourselves the self-love that we need, then our bodies can't assimilate or process or alchemize the attacks, and it weakens us and it affects our body. But I'm feeling like enough of us are getting stronger and stronger. And this is part of how humans adapt. I mean, this is how our immune system is built when we're kids. I mean, how they're like, oh, it's good when your kid catches a lot of colds. It means they'll be healthier later. We can't be shielded and put in a bubble. Sometimes it's all about experiencing all of it so that our body can begin to build up a defense system. And so the spiritual body, the mental body, the emotional body is just like the physical. It's all connected. So when we need to do that on our spiritual bodies, our spiritual immune system gets built. And pretty much they've played so many games that we have all the antibodies on a spiritual level to be able to call it out and notice it and protect ourselves. And I think we've reached that threshold where our wisdom and our consciousness is in the higher dimensions as we're grounding into the core sun of this planet, which is an ascension planet. And I just see them just like on the outside of it all, like scrambling at what they could possibly do to put an end to what we're doing. And they can't. They absolutely can't. We got to drop the fear of death too. I mean, this physical body is just a suit we're wearing, and let's develop our consciousness and work on, unplugging and not being controlled, and let the rest be an adventure. None of us know when we're going to go. So live, let fear be a teacher and let it give you caution, but embrace the fact that you're a powerful, dreamer and manifester, and let go of all that and just let yourself, enjoy this experience. But be honest when you're angry with yourself, cry when you're sad, embrace the 4 elements, where actually there's a lot more elements than that, more senses that we're going to tap into. It's not about, be positive, be positive. Be positive about the times that you're not positive, because that it's not the destination. It's something that you're moving through to purify it and to release it. But don't deny it. But be positive that you're going to be okay if you can just get yourself to the other side without drugging yourself and falling into addiction or going on pharmaceuticals if you can help it. But if you've made any of those negative choices, you can turn all of it around. People like you and me do sessions with people to help with that. So.
Now, I've heard you speak about multi-strand DNA, such as 12-strand DNA and so on. Can you explain that concept and where are the majority of human beings at this point in terms of their DNA strands, and what does it mean for someone to move to a 12-strand DNA? Are they physically manifesting 12-strand DNA, or is it more of a multidimensional genetic change that's taking place? And do you think that that's happening on a much more mass scale these days?
Yeah. I would say that most humans have 2-strand DNA turned on. The indigo and crystal kids have maybe 3 to 4 turned on. And we all have 12-strand DNA. And basically the 12-strand DNA is the tree of life. The tree of good and evil, the duality, has been the cause of us being dumbed down, because we're here witnessing all this stuff, gaining knowledge, gaining truth and awareness, or losing our minds to the mind control. That's why they target our minds, because we're on a path of knowledge and obtaining knowledge. So they're like, let's just go straight for the brain and manipulate that quest of knowledge, which is the quest to the Holy Grail, really, because our vessel is that energy. And their quest for the Holy Grail is controlling the Stargates and controlling our DNA. That's how they lock that in for themselves. Our DNA is connected to the Stargates on Earth. There's 12 Stargates. We have all 12 strands of DNA. The 13th, though, which is the core sun of this planet, is the gateway out of here. And now the divine feminine, in union with the masculine, is the host of the ascension timeline, whereas before it was the Melchizedeks. And that came from the 12 tribes, different than the initial seeding of the 12 tribes, which is what we all are. But the Hebrews that ended up getting so patriarchalized, is that a word? So kind of infiltrated with religion that it lost its true essence. And that's why there's such confusion about Zionists and Jews, and and they're using all this to make it even worse, you know? And the thing is, once you choose Luciferianism or Satanism, you're no longer a Jew, but yet they still call, you know, the banksters Jews. And it's just like, and I don't even want to get into the labels, but that's just to mess with us. So because we were born with not all our DNA strands turned on from the very get-go when we were coming into this new creation after it sank into harmonic universe 1 and we collapsed, and there were new planets introduced to the solar system, the whole idea is that we would share codes over the course of many, many years, and new generations would come in and we would activate each other and help each other turn on strands. That's why unity consciousness is so important. It's not about us all getting along as much as it's about we have pieces for each other so that we can turn on the dormant strands. That's why there's no chosen one, but there is activations that we get from certain lines of energy, you know, and there's 7 root races. So each root race holds a particular strand, and there's 5 cloister races, which turns into 12, and it gets kind of complicated. But so the agenda in the Second World War was to wipe out the Hebrews or wipe out the Jews because they held that code that we needed to get to the next step. And the thing is, it didn't completely and totally rely on them either, because there's other ways that we can do it. And each one of us holds a piece of everything from the very beginning. And that's why there's warriors. That's why there's light workers, because we're compensating for what wasn't able to unfold with grace and ease because of the infiltration and attacks and the Anunnaki and the fact that we've been very vulnerable with this life, death, reincarnation. So as we go through the tree of knowledge and we start to wake up, we start to turn on our DNA strands. And the whole idea is that we restore the tree of life, which is actually our 12-strand DNA system or our template and potential. The best way to do that is to bring balance to your masculine and feminine. The best way you're going to know if those energies aren't in balance is your physical health will let you know, your relationships with loved ones will let you know, your relationship with yourself will let you know. And you just got to look at all the symptoms of your life. You can figure out everything that you need to work on in literally a few days. If you just observe the patterns, if you observe your symptoms, and you just dig real deep into it all. And so this is a major time of DNA upgrade. Uranus is the planet that helps with that. Pluto gives us the transformations. And so everybody's got the potential to turn on that 12-strand DNA template. And but if we don't unify, it's going to be very difficult for people to gain access to an energetic that would turn on a dormant strand. And that's why we need each other. You know, it's like, you know, all of us that are doing this mission work, we know that we're all different pieces of the puzzle. We can't all do it alone. But when we do that, it's like, or the whole Mayan concept of I am another yourself, we see that likeness and we see the fact that we are one. But we are also unique, and we also have our own individuality. So oneness is diversity and harmony. And when diversity is in harmony and we respect each other's differences, we are functioning as a whole, but we're also doing our own unique role to be that particular piece, just like nature. Every animal in nature is a part of the web of life. You know, and if you remove any of it, it kind of throws off the balance. And so same thing with us. Each one of us matters. Every one of us that's asleep throws off the balance. Every one of us that's carrying programming throws off the balance. But if enough of us maintain or connect with what it's all about, that's the ripple effect. And that's what gets us over the tipping point. And that's when even the most unconscious are going to feel their DNA start to turn on without having to go through the rabbit holes like we have with the conspiracy stuff. It's kind of like a nice gift. Like, yeah, you don't have to go through all this. But they have to be open. If their heart is able to receive, they're going to get it. But if they're really shut down, it's going to be harder, but all of it's inevitable. I mean, and this window period when it closes doesn't mean that people won't be able to. But this window period is really about at least starting to get a clue and at least saying to yourself, I devote to this path. I'm open to what it means. But, we're moving past the need for the knowledge, and now it's just getting into the heart and just recognizing, let's just all get along and learn real mutual respect and integrity. The conspiracy stuff is just for us to understand the game being played, but the real waking up has to do with how we treat one another and ourselves.
Now, I've heard you talk about timelines in many of your lectures, and I think you might have mentioned it when you were out here. So there are multiple timelines that are existing simultaneously, from what I understand. Can you explain the concept of a timeline and how many timelines that you're aware of that actually are operating at this time?
Well, around, in Atlantis and Lemuria, when those civilizations collapsed, that's when the Illuminati started to form. That's when we started to see, religion, and we started to see, indigenous tribes getting compromised, and those that held the ancient knowledge getting driven underground or infiltrated, like the Masons and the Templars. And so we've been in a lot of hell cycles for the last 26,000 years. Technologies were put in place after Atlantis had, collapsed to affect the ley lines and the grids, and to also affect our DNA so that it would be extremely difficult for us to actually heal our DNA and upgrade it. So it's not just our consciousness and how we get, we have to, deal with everything under the sun that's trying to keep us from it, that's been around for so long and is passed down generationally. That's why we get damaged DNA, because they fell into the programming, they pick up a behavior pattern, it becomes a physical symptom, and then you pass it on to the next generation. And every generation has the job to improve upon what they got from their ancestors. Unless, their ancestors hold a piece that they can channel or connect with, of course. And so the dark cycles that we've been going through is I almost look at it like a bunch of wires, like telephone, when you look on the ground and you've got your computer wire, you got your cell phone charger, and you've got like a whole mess of tangles on the ground, and it's tying knots. Like, how did it tie a knot? I had to just uncoil my, my wiring before we got on. And so it's like, how did that happen? So that period of history where we're dealing with all the wars, Second World War, First World War, Civil War, and then, the ones that were a lot further back, the Roman Empire and Babylon and all this, other stuff, and just all the crazy history. Everything was in tangles. There was a lot of different timelines, but it was chaotic. It was just sort of like, something we've been kind of trying to uncoil based on looking at, the families we're born into, which we're not always born into. So we can't identify too strongly with bloodlines and our race, or, anything that creates too much of like, this is me and this is you, because it's all almost a part of that timeline thing. Family lines and bloodlines can be looked at like DNA strands, and certain bloodlines have been infiltrated and they're like damaged DNA strands. And so the DNA has a lot to do with timelines. So now we're in a period, and I would say in the early 1990s, where the entanglement started to smooth out a little bit, and now we're dealing with almost like what looks like a highway, in different timelines that are a lot more visible, because we're starting to recognize like, oh, okay, the end of the world, what's all that about? What's all that propaganda about? And we start to put more attention and consciousness on where the human race is going. Whereas before, the reason it was entangled is because everybody's killing each other and fighting and wanting territory and, trying to colonize and, trying to invent, different things to improve the quality of life, and all these different movements. And a lot of it was manipulated through the Illuminati and all these different things, so that in this window period, we would stay conquered and divided, because we'd be sitting here holding on to resentments because of those wars and because of all those tangles that have confused us, so that if they ever had to leave us alone for a while, we would annihilate ourselves because of the trauma and damage that that portion of our world history did to us. Because these wars, were completely unnecessary. Killing people is completely unnecessary. And so now it's like, okay, so what's the new war about? Even though we still see wars going on where there is fighting and killing, it's a war on consciousness. It's a war on our frequency, because now that we can conceptualize, where the human race is going, they don't want us to know that they're a portion of that entanglement, and the root of some of those timelines are positive ascension timelines. And they've been trying to figure out a way to steer us into the artificial ones. So it ends up coming down to just about 2 or 3 timelines when we get to this window period, where it's either an artificial one, which will take us right into New World Order, or, Earth catastrophes, connected to like HARP, or nature working on rebalancing itself, and us being on a positive ascension timeline where we're not in the wake of those disasters because we're expanding as conscious lucid dreamers, because we're allowing our creative energy to be linked with these higher, more mystical realms, and we're being sort of lifted right out of it. But we're still grounded. We're just moving into those higher earth energies, just like Tara, 4, 5, and 6 dimension, and then Gaia, which is 7, 8, and 9. Now, the reason this planetary body is called Gaia is because she seeded the core of this earth, because the consciousness of Gaia, more physicalized, was in those higher dimensions. But the whole being of like Gaia-Sophia is based on the upper dimensions coming in to give this planetary body a chance to return home and to be beyond this 3D programming, because we're not 3D beings. That's just the matrix. And so now when we look at ourselves, the artificial timeline is about us staying with our dumbed down DNA and going right into a transhumanism agenda, or right into a possible extinction scenario. But there's no such thing as extinction, because you can't destroy the soul and you can't destroy energy. But when you give your power away and your mental body away, you can be linked into an artificial intelligence system and lose your soul matrix and become like a tool. So I say right now, like, they hijacked the ascension timeline, the organic ascension timeline, and the warriors and light workers built a new neural pathway around that hijacking and looped back to the organic ascension timeline again. And that's why we had to really amp it up, because, in 2009, it's kind of like, where are the floating cities and why aren't we ascended? Like, what's going on? And I think we all looked at each other like, this isn't what we thought, and then 2012 comes and we're just wiping our brow, like relieved that, we're still here. While some people are like, nothing happened. I'm like, oh, believe me, nothing happening is a good thing. But this is where it stands, and it really does have to do with our DNA, but we don't have to worry about the DNA. All we need to do is not worry actually, but focus on our consciousness, because consciousness trumps everything. Disease, bloodlines, your past history, whatever your karma is. And the willingness to just make the corrections that are needed, because there is no punishing God. Everything comes back to balance, because the original creation in a free will universe started off with the masculine and feminine as one. And that union within us is going to help us to upgrade our DNA, and making subtle improvements in how we carry energy, the words we speak, because we're free energy technologies. Everything that we say and do creates our reality. Everything we believe. And so our belief systems and the things that we express determine which timeline we're on. We could be very compromised, but if we're committed and devoted to the ascension timeline, nothing's going to keep us from it. And that's why there's no need to fear. But it might mean that you have to go through a detox. It might mean you have to unplug a little and pay attention to where you've been manipulated.
Now, are the majority of our government officials, do you think, of a lower consciousness or being influenced by lower consciousness? And why is that? I mean, wouldn't some of them have good intentions as they're going into that? Or do you think that they're selected beforehand by this lower consciousness to be in control of the consciousness of the planet?
Well, basically, it's been said that the presidency now is a CIA project, and they're groomed. They're potential Manchurian candidates, that are going to be triggered at that right moment to steer us into the wrong direction. Many have been, mind controlled and compromised. And so there's the altars that we see with the super soldiers and people that have gone through trauma-based mind control. And you can be in an altar and have no idea that there's a whole bunch of other personalities that are hanging with you. And that's why we get so much sincerity. That's why people thought Bill Clinton, hey, he seems like a great guy. And wow, Obama, and we feel it, and we feel their sincerity. And that's where the trick is, because once they trigger a different altar, you're dealing with a completely different person who's going to take us somewhere completely different. We're also dealing with cloning technologies, which is a really difficult one to wrap our heads around, where they could take the original being, take him somewhere, and put a clone in and operate through that clone. They are able to download memories so that the person is functioning like they're that other person. There's a lot of movies out there. I mean, the whole sci-fi world has so much to reveal about what's really going on. And so anything that has to do with government and it's sci-fi, I would check it out. I could think of a few ones. There's one called The Island, I think. and it has to do with the cloning project. It doesn't have to do with the presidency, but there's the Manchurian Candidate one. Obama was in the Mars training program, and that was a program about being groomed to be a future president. Now, Andy was a part of that program, and he wants to run for office, but his deal is more about exposing everything and telling everything that people like Obama are never going to say. And then there's new reports that their kids aren't their legitimate kids. And then, of course, we have the Clintons, and Hillary Clinton is wrapped up in the MK Ultra monarch stuff. She tortured and abused Kathy O'Brien. And so part of the susceptibility is already having a desire for power and greed. Those are the easiest ones to possess. But when you're dealing with the 13 families and you're dealing with an Illuminati bloodline that's running for president, you're dealing with multi-generational abuse. And you're dealing with an agenda that is coming from demonic beings, lower entities that are basically operating through them. So which one is who? I think we pretty much know the Clintons and the Bushes are kind of on the same team. As far as Obama, I think this is an unusual case. I think he's definitely compromised. I'm leaning more towards he'd more than likely be a clone than somebody like Hillary Clinton is.
So,
Hillary Clinton's more caught up in the possession. She's possessed.
Mm-hmm. So who are these Illuminati bloodlines? I know I've heard some of the main ones, but you mentioned 28 of them, I think you said, right?
13.
I'm sorry, 13?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, 13. Okay. Who are the 13 bloodlines?
I don't have them all I don't have them all memorized, but we're dealing with like the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Kennedys. And Kennedy, the reason he got assassinated is because he didn't want to be in that mindset. And Eisenhower briefed him about the extraterrestrials and the UFO thing. And then they were just like, okay, he's calling it out, and he's a part of our group. And I think that's why they assassinate the ones that they believe have oaths or some sort of right to whatever agenda they're a part of. And that's why a lot of us, I don't even want to knock on wood, might have some extra protection because we didn't sign any oath. We weren't born into those families that have those pacts and agreements. But yet when you're dealing with multi-generational abuse, which Aleister Crowley was a part of, they can bring in souls and breed them into these programs too. So the 13 families, the reason it's interesting is because the 13-dimensional core of this planet is the number 13. There's no 13th floor at most buildings. And it's like they've hijacked that number. They took out the 13th sign of the zodiac. They took out our connection with the 13th calendar. They took out the 13th apostle, which is Mary Magdalene, and just made it 12. And so, yes, there's 12 stargates. Yes, we're 12 strand. But for us to really go into the 13 is to awaken to what the true 13 is, not the 13 families. They're doing the reversals of everything to be in power. When everything turns the way it's supposed to through the Venus transits and the activation of the diamond star within this earth, then we're ascending. But they do all these rituals and reversals in order to keep the dark mother enslaved and to keep the divine feminine in exile, because once she gets in balance with the masculine, it's a whole nother thing. So a lot of those family names, I think DuPont, I think people will be very disappointed that I don't have all the names memorized. And maybe it's because if I meet a person with that last name, it's so that I don't, get all freaked out. The Mellons, DuPont, and yeah, I mean, you could Google it. They're going to list them all, but there's a lot of corporation names that are the same names as some of the Illuminati members.
So 13 is very significant. Now, you mentioned a 13th sign in the zodiac. So is there actually a 13th sign you've identified, or it's just not available to us at this point?
There's been a bit of information, but it's new. So anybody who hasn't heard of it yet, it's something that didn't come online until 2010 or so, as far as, I think they found out, or it started to get put out there just last year or the year before, but only people that were born after 2010 would want to use the 13 zodiac system. Anybody who's before 2010, it would still be the 12 zodiac system. And so you and I who are astrologers, it doesn't screw up what we're doing, because it would only need to be put in place for those born after 2010. And I can't find any software or a program to use it myself, so I'm not able to incorporate it into my readings. If I do read like a child, who was born after 2010, I try and find and overlay a 13 system on the zodiac just to bring that element in. But it's like we weren't reaching it before, and now we are. And that's a part of the window period. Because we have been closed off. I mean, these catastrophes threw the Earth off its axis, and it's been in rehabilitation. It's kind of like, if we were in a car accident, we're walking in physical therapy, and they've been taking advantage of the trauma of these advanced civilizations collapsing. And we've been trying to get our bearings and figure it all out and share these codes. And, and they're just like, this is a great opportunity to really mess with this planet. And they were observing us for a while before they came in and messed with us. And now that the planet's in alignment with the galactic plane, the number 13 becomes important. And then we see like, oh, how funny that there's 13 bloodlines. And what they're trying to do is be the power that pulls us into kind of like they do with the Christ story, where we're getting enough of the truth, or we're getting similar symbols, but they're tweaking it so that it creates a reversal so that we descend instead of ascend.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that the planet's in alignment with the galactic plane. When was the last time that happened? Was it about 13,000 or 26,000 years, something like that?
Yeah, I think it was in like 36,000 BC or something like that.
I see. Okay.
I could get the exact number, but it's been a long time. And if people miss this one, they're going to have to wait quite some time for the next one to come. But I think when we're doing the years ago, it would make sense that it would have been maybe 26,000 years ago, but we didn't have much of an opportunity because that's when everything got sabotaged. But I can get that exact date for people if they want to contact me. I have it on one of my slides. I think it's 36,000 something BC.
Mm-hmm. Now, at that point, we were going into a dark period, right? That we're crossing into the darkness, essentially.
You mean back then or now?
Back then.
Yeah, and that was the greatest way to lock us into these cycles for so long, mm-hmm. because we had to wait till the next window opened. So they got right in there, because if you think about it, we would have been seeded with this DNA potential to, have all these different root races turn on all these strands. They thought it was going to take like a few generations, a couple thousand years tops. They didn't think it would take thousands and thousands and thousands of years, because it all got sabotaged from the very beginning. The Archonic system and these dark technologies got put in place right away. If none of that happened, and it was just the Gaia matrix, and it was just us being born into this, we would have advanced so much quicker, and we would have lost the necessity of death, rebirth, and incarnation, because we would have gotten back to our immortal knowingness, and we'd be able to come and go from the physical as we choose, which is what's available for us right now. That's why it's so important to watch out for the game. It's like, this is still going to happen. It's just there's a major trap. I mean, the whole system is a trap in a lot of ways. Now, are there well-intentioned people, you asked before? I think there are people that want to run for president that want to change the world. Absolutely. It's a dangerous zone. People are like, why don't you run for president? I'm like, first of all, I'd turn the White House into like a homeless shelter, and I would live in a humble home, like, because I'm not going to do it the same way that anybody else is. I'm more interested in starting a new paradigm. So Andrew Basiago, is going to be running, and Bernie Sanders sounds like a decent person, but I don't want to say anything about Bernie because I don't know him well enough. And a lot of times somebody seems like the perfect person, and then they're compromised, and we go through the same thing all over again. So I'm not really into the government period at all. It's time for us to be the new paradigm and look to each other, because the earth is abundant. That is the president. I mean, to me, if anybody asks who do I vote for us, and I vote for Gaia, because that's all we need.
Now, you mentioned early on how the Illuminati originated from the collapse of Atlantis, and I think maybe Lemuria also. So is the Illuminati bloodline originally reptilian or some other kind of extraterrestrial race? I know that pre-Catholicism, there was a religion that was based on called Paganism that appears to have been the worship of some kind of a reptilian god. Can you elaborate on the origins of that bloodline?
Well, it's connected to the Nephilim and their hybrids. And when we think about like the Anunnaki or the Watchers breeding with humans, and we're dealing with different factions, that's when it starts to get really complicated. What ended up happening is there was this group that was the illuminated ones that were going to help to guide humanity. And they were connected to the Watchers, or the ones that weren't really fully human. But then there was a mixing. And because there's a negative ET faction of the Anunnaki, or a negative faction of the Anunnaki, they started to figure out a way to compromise the whole thing. And it was reptilian based. And what ended up happening is there were attempts to heal this reptilian mindset from these more negative factions of the Anunnaki that were really building upon this. And I might have not all of this completely 100% of what I just said, but this part is pretty darn certain. What ended up happening is they wanted to heal these race lines. But because the fallen seraphim and these fallen angelics wanted control over the time matrix, they actually compromised their DNA a while back and only gave themselves 10 or 11 strand potential. The 10 strand potential is the Black Sun group, which are more Satanists, and the 11 strand potential is more the Anunnaki. And they compromised their ability to have a 12 strand because they didn't want to heal. And so when they started to really infiltrate everything with the hope that they would be able to maintain control, because they had to cut that off if they were going to be in control. Otherwise, they'd be connected to spirit still, and they would heal whatever negative ego easily, just like we have the opportunity to. And so when they attempted to heal the race lines, they put Orphan consciousness mixed with the reptilian, which is a very high level consciousness. And the trauma-based mind control came in to keep them from accessing this higher consciousness. Because if they weren't being traumatized, they might potentially heal. And because not everybody's the dark ringleader of the Illuminati, but they're just wrapped up in it because they're part of those families and they're being controlled, they would have the ability to decide, I actually, want to heal. And then they would lose their grip on them. But the thing is, the ones that compromise their DNA, even though nobody can be born into their lines, because that's also why they did it, if they did want to redeem themselves, they could be born into an angelic bloodline or a bloodline that holds that potential that hasn't compromised themselves. The 13 families has a lot of branches, but it's the core center of it all, which is, the darkest, and it has to do more with the off-planet entities that created the hybrids, who they consider to be their masters. The chronology, though, of the Watchers and the different factions of the Anunnaki and the interbreeding and, the formulation of the fixed 13 seems to relate to Babylonian times and wanting to, go into that covert control, because in Atlantis, it was a little bit more kind of obvious. And because they had these power generator crystals that caused the explosion that created the asteroid belt, they had to sort of retreat, and that's why it's a covert shadow system, shadow government. And then they pretty much targeted all the different groups that were holding the ancient mysteries and teachings. And that's why a lot of these texts have been distorted. And, we see that if we say the word Freemason, most people are going to think negative instead of what they used to represent, because and that's why, like I said too, about the Zionists and the Jews, and why that's all so screwed up, because it goes back to these times, and there's major competition. But a lot of those lines ended up turning Luciferianism into Lucifer worship. But it's not really about the entities. It's basically the service to self mentality.
You mentioned a lot of different kind of extraterrestrial races, from the Greys, the reptilians, and we also talked. I don't know if we didn't really talk too much about the more positive races out there. There, from these different kind of races, the ones that are more benevolent, what is it? What function are they serving for? In their work with us? Why are they here, and what is it that they're hoping for us to do in their involvement with us?
Well, there's a lot about non-interference, but when we started to get interfered with, that whole concept sort of went out the window. I look at it like within our own being, all these laws apply. We have a negative ego we slip into in this free will universe. That invites a lot of Archonic forces in and kind of links us more with the negative side of things. When we're, more conscious and we're expanding into our multidimensional body, we can start to conceptualize more where these other races are, the ones that are actually, good. And there's far more positive races out there than negative. The negative is so small compared to the vastness of benevolent beings and the different star systems they're from. But this particular galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, is just kind of been a bit of a mess. When Milky Way and Andromeda were one, that's when everything was really thriving. And then the Milky Way sort of split off from it, and we've been sort of in this holding tank with these galactic wars. And the Dracos that came in when the imbalance was really strong and just basically attacked, it's just like the body responds if it's dealing with the disease. What ends up happening is either we take drugs to deal with the symptoms, or we start to enhance our immune system. And the benevolent races represent the immune system, and so does our higher consciousness. And the purpose they serve is for us to step up to the plate and do our part to be able to notice them and see them and know that they've always been here and they've always been helping. And they are not in competition with Source. They are not negating of, the God-Goddess principle. They are a part of that energy. And the guardian races and other races from other universes that came in from Andromeda have come in to help. But at the same time, this ascension period is all about Milky Way and Andromeda becoming one. So in a sense, they're not that foreign. They're just trying to pull us back into that wholeness. There's been rescue missions and all sorts of things. The Nordics that fled a planet called Rigel have been trying to help us. So the Pleiadians, that's a pretty benevolent star system, but there are some negative Nordics that are all wrapped up in the race game, like the purebloods or whatever, and just kind of, they worked with Hitler for a little while, but then the Greys worked with Hitler. It's just been so complex. And then the beings from Sirius, there's Sirius A and Sirius B. Some beings are positive and some, aren't. And as long as we're in duality, we're going to see good and bad in all races. There's some Greys that are good. There's some reptilians that are good. And when I say good, I mean service to others, not out for the self at the expense of others. And it really depends which race you are, because they're not looking at themselves like, oh, I'm good, or, oh, I'm evil. They're just out for whatever they feel they deserve. I mean, some of the reptilian mindset, they think this planet belongs to them because they were the first beings here. But when you're dealing with the collapsing of harmonic universes and different seedings of the human race and the origins of creation and the true source, that's not how it works. Does a mother say that her oldest child should dominate the younger ones for the rest of their life and enslave them? No. And so, and they can't exactly, to a certain degree, there are native reptilians that went underground, but they more think that the humans have become a virus because of the things that we bought into and some of these agendas that really blew things like out of proportion. So it gets really complex, but the role of the benevolent ones, I would say, is the role that we can relate to as our immune system. What is the role of our immune system? What is the role of disease? To actually wake us up and make us stronger. It's not there to crush us. None of these beings are really, maybe all they know is to crush us, but in the larger picture of it all, that's not their purpose. The purpose is to learn from duality, to get stronger because of it, and to increase our capacity to connect with the things that can counteract it, negate it, clear it. Because we know when we activate our immune system, that's what clears us from all invasion, whether it's a psychic attack, whether it's a germ, a bacteria, a virus. And so they're guiding us, but they're not going to do it for us. And they're not here to save us, but they're here to help us as long as we're ready to help ourselves.
Now, by your knowledge in terms of world events, I'm not talking about mainstream, obviously, but what exactly is happening behind the scenes in the realm of the world governmental system and financial system? There's been a lot of turbulence and change in recent years there. But do you see some sort of, and of course, even on the mainstream, we're seeing some positive things like Bitcoin as an alternative financial system and a variety of other things that are starting to make their way out to the mainstream. Even in free energy technology, we're starting to see water power generators that are starting to make their way out to the mainstream. But aside from those things, what are you actually seeing happening behind the scenes, and what kind of a future are we headed into in, say, the next 10 years?
Well, I'm only going for the positive timeline, and that's the only one I'm going to empower, to anybody, because that's where it's at. And I do feel there's going to be a lot of breakthroughs. There's unbelievable geniuses and wizards and all sorts of, advanced technologies that are very in tune with nature that are, potentially going to come out more and more and more. And their ability to stop it and manipulate it and shut it down is going to get much harder, because people are seeing a distinct difference between the negative forms of power and these agendas, as people get aware of the fact that we're being sprayed and they get aware of the mind control and some of the manipulative technologies, it's going to be hard to empower the ones that have their hands on it, that are trying to manipulate all of us. And so these other ones, are going to be celebrated by the people. And as long as the people are empowering these breakthroughs, the other ones are going to get starved. But as long as everybody's still looking to Hillary and the rest of them, then they're sort of in a trance, and they're not even paying attention to that because somebody else is calling it woo-woo, or, doing a smear campaign on them, and they're like, yeah, and they believe it, right? And I just think it's getting really, really obvious because the heart energy is expanding. People's integrity and just the sparkle in their eyes and the kindness in their heart is so much more apparent than these terrible leaders that are compromising us. And it's going to get really obvious to the most unconscious people very, very soon. So I see that it's inevitable because it's just as inevitable as a flower blossoming. It's already written into the script. It's in the seed, and each person is seeded with that divine potential. We're just at different phases, but I think it gets obvious when we look around. We can see that's what I want to become. I don't want to be sprayed with pesticide. I don't want to be trampled on. And, and the survival of the human spirit knows better than to compromise oneself too much. So I see a ton of breakthroughs, our ability to clean up the environment, but where we're all joining together and empowering each other's, ideas and inventions and solutions, and not going through the government to solve these problems, because then they're going to introduce the negative ETs with disclosure, and they're going to turn them into our masters that have to help us because our environment is so thrashed and we're in so much disarray that here come the ETs to help us, but they're going to need to control us in order to help us. We got to ignore all of that because we've got everything we could possibly need amongst us. There's plenty of people that can make contact and channel these higher dimensional beings to help us as well. And if people don't connect with higher dimensional beings or extraterrestrials or channel, you're not missing anything. Don't think that it's some spiritual gift that you're lacking or you just don't understand it. It's just we all have different parts to play. I mean, some people focus on a direct connection with spirit and with earth, and their offering might just be, something artistic or musical or, just uplifting people or whatever. I mean, we each have our unique roles. So I see nothing but breakthroughs and positive developments. I'm working on following up with Hillary Clinton, who has just been charged with racketeering, and she's supposed to go on trial. I don't know how authentic that is, but I'm trying to contact people involved to find out more about its legitimacy. But that's really good news if that's happening, because, one has to ask themselves, where are the real lawyers out there? Why aren't they doing something? I mean, why are we the ones that are doing things when people have signed up for jobs like a police force, or, they're here to serve the public? How are they missing the stuff that we're getting? We could really use their help. So I think it's really important that we appeal to the heart and the good nature of all those that have chosen those positions of service, and not create this us against them, or, oh, they're negative because they're controlled. It's like, you can help somebody deprogramming by just talking to their heart and spirit and appealing to their family values, because a lot of people, have children and want the best for their futures as well. And I think those systems that have been controlled are going to turn around too. And we're going to really start to regenerate the consciousness within the foundation that's already been set by turning it more towards the light, instead of them being enslaved and not seeking justice like we are, like they're supposed to. Because every judge in a courtroom should be putting these people on trial. And it's like, why aren't they? And I think that's going to change. So.
Mm-hmm. I know even Bush has been charged with war crimes in other countries. Well, where is Hillary being charged with racketeering?
I think, well, the lawyer's based out of Florida, but he also Pennsylvania. This all just happened yesterday, so it's very fresh. And I haven't heard from him yet, but I trying to get a grip on the story still.
Mm-hmm. No, we were speaking earlier about how how our solar system is crossing over the celestial equator, and so it's going into a period of greater enlightenment. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it's definitely an organic thing. I mean, we've been very injured and traumatized. The planetary body has been as well. So it's almost like saying the opportunity to really heal is here. And we have two options. Either we're going to be on the life support system and on the hospital bed, and we're going to be linked into the technology that keeps us alive, but we're basically brain dead. Or we are going to be holistic. We are going to be conscious, and we're going to heal in the way that nature provides, because the only thing nature knows how to do is regenerate. It's already programmed into nature. It's already programmed into our bodies. It's the mind control that gets us out of sync with our bodies that causes degradation. If we just unplug from it all, the natural forces are doing all the magic. We don't have to like rack our brains about how we're going to do this. It's such a huge part of the flow, and it is enlightenment because we already are enlightened. We just don't do enough energy maintenance. You know, it's kind of like saying the kitchen's always clean, but it gets messy. You know, but if you wipe off the counters and you put the dishes in the sink and you turn it on, you know, the true nature of it is that all the food and particles were introduced, but what's underneath it all is pure enlightenment and clarity. So we got to clean our mental bodies. We got to purify our emotional bodies, because we need to understand energetic maintenance instead of trying to attain something. And if we just tend to ourselves every day and we let go of this stuff that gets cluttered in our minds, maybe through writing, or we release the emotions that, you know, we might just be shoving down, we're going to get, you know, physical symptoms. And the beauty is everything's very simple, because we can just look at our physical environment and just know that, you know, the fact that things accumulate is a part of life, but the maintaining the cleanliness or the purity is, you know, up to us and it's work. But we do it in our physical environment, or else we'd be living in a mess and there'd be mold and germs and flies. And if we don't do it with our beings, we get archons, we get entities, so I mean, the same thing, you know, so just clean it up, just like you do your kitchen, and you'll get the same results. You'll be sparkly and enlightened, because it already is that underneath the surface.
So basically the cycle is heading in a positive direction. There's really, I tend to believe that the cycles kind of dictate our experience to a great extent. So if we're heading into a period of enlightenment for thousands of years, then there's really not much chance that these darker forces are going to be able to hold on to control of our consciousness. Does that make any sense? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And, you know, we have to look at it on an individual level. If we look at the collective as a whole and we gauge that as where we are and what our progress is, it's going to be very crushing and disappointing, because we can't count on everybody, but we can do our best to try and wake them up or whatever. But we have to know that if we figure that out personally for ourselves, nobody can take us off that path. We're not going to be taken down by the unconscious ones, even if the numbers aren't in our favor and there's just a few of us. Even if there's just 12 of us or 20 of us, we're still going to get there, because, you know, we lost the capacity to have a lot of assistance from benevolent ET races when we made deals with the negative entities that happened far before Eisenhower. And believe me, that was not really what he wanted. They called it a surrender, not a treaty, because this had already been in place. There were already these 3-letter organizations in place. And he actually wanted to side with the Nordics, but then at the same time, you know, they're trying to figure this stuff out, you know. But we have to understand that it's up to us as individuals to ascend. And that's going to help to invite others to join in with us, but nothing's going to stop the individual that decides that that's where they're heading. And I would say that the whole planet has the potential, the whole human race has the potential. And whatever chooses to not go with that, that's probably a pretty strong choice that they made, because it's staring them in the face. I mean, people know what these words are. People can look on the internet. As far as maybe locations that don't have computers and are very compromised, they still have a soul, and they have everything within them to tap into as well. So those that don't ascend have really made a conscious choice probably not to, because no matter how abused you are and how suffering you are, that's not taking it away. That's just a difficult life experience, because we're vulnerable as humans with all the injustice that exists. But, you know, there's divine innocence. You can be in the worst of situations and still stay connected to what counts, and you will eventually move beyond whatever that suffering is if you persevere. But everybody is welcome, you know, and it's simply a choice. And if it feels too difficult, you just have to ask for assistance. You know, we're dealing with an unconditional, like, loving God source. You know, the goddess unconditionally loves us. That's why she gave us this experience on this planet. And this particular density that's holding all this adversity and conflict, she sacrificed this portion of her body so that we could learn and grow. But there's no door shut on anybody or any judgment or punishment. It's up to people to decide.
Mm-hmm. There's a question I forgot to ask from earlier. You mentioned that there were, I think, 13 stargates on the planet. Is that correct?
Well, the 13th, I would say, is the core sun, where it's heated with the 13-dimensional core. Otherwise, there's 12 stargates. Okay.
So what is a stargate, and what function does it serve on the planet?
It connects us with other dimensions. It connects us with other worlds. And so when the natural stargates open, it's parallel to us expanding into our multidimensional energy. As we choose to expand, we help the planet and her natural stargates open. And as the natural stargates are naturally opening, it helps us to know to expand. And I learned a lot about this as a kid, because this was a huge part of helping to keep the natural stargates from closing, helping to open the natural stargates through clearing the stargates of inorganic entities, because these dark beings have been trying to shut down the stargates, which is parallel to them wanting to shut down our DNA, which is why we're seeing weather modification, chemtrails, GMOs, fluoride in the water. I mean, that's making it hard, but we have to remember it's energy and frequency. It doesn't damage us as much as we think if our consciousness stays intact. Dumbing us down has an effect on our DNA, but it first starts with our consciousness, where we lose the ability to, think or feel or connect in a real way. And that's where the initial problem is. But when we counteract it by just recognizing, something pushing on us, and we say, hey, wait a second, I don't want to be pushed. Okay, I won't drink the water then, and I'll take something to clear away whatever that was that got in my body. I mean, everything can bounce back. There isn't really permanent damage, I don't believe. It's like a doctor saying you can't cure this. I don't believe that. I believe everything can be cured. Everything's reversible. And if it's not, then you can turn it into something beautiful, just like a scar. Yeah, you might not be able to make the scar go away, but look at what it really represents. I mean, it's a badge of honor a lot of times. The stargates, when they open, this is when we'll start to understand higher earth energies and how the physics are different and how we're much more magical and we're able to manifest things at will. Instead of rely on the money system or doctors to heal our physical symptoms, we'll be able to heal spontaneously because we have the capacity to heal ourselves. We'll be able to come and go from the physical as we please. We'll be able to pull things out of thin air, and we'll be able to levitate, and we will not be bound to the laws of physicality, because the true leader and what we're recognizing is spirit, and it animates physical matter. But we've been taught that physical matter has a lot more power over us, and that's why our consciousness has been so suppressed and why we've been in so much pain and turmoil.
So these are
none of this has been natural. Sorry, go ahead.
So these are not physical structures or technologies. They're multidimensional portals that are at different places on the earth. Are they in physical locations around the earth, or are they? What exactly are they? Yeah.
Well, I would say that they are, when they open, it's like a chakra almost, and it's like a clearing of a chakra, and it expands us, and it's like PowerPoints, kind of like the meridian system of the body. There's particular places that will increase the flow to the rest of the body. And if we look at the meridian of a body, those maps the acupuncturists have, they have dark dots on some places, but the rest of it is just lines. And that's kind of like the planet, where it has grid lines, but it also has these power spots or vortexes. And one stargate will be in one place, but it'll be linked to a stargate someplace else. And there's a pairing of stargates. And there's, I guess, 6 pairs if there's 12 stargates. And they use artificial stargates on top of the natural stargates to be able to make connections with extraterrestrial races and to bring in dark beings from other universes. And even Stonehenge, I mean, that is where the dark technologies were put under, in an underground base to affect all the ley lines. So there's, if people, research this, there's artificial stargates and there's natural stargates. The best way to understand it is to look at our own chakras, our own DNA, and to know that when we're advancing ourselves into our multidimensional body and the natural stargates of Earth are opening up, we, in a sense, lift the veil and we have access to our star family. We're able to see things we used to not be able to see because we're programmed to be a third dimensional being, but we're beyond that. So we can only see things that are really physical. And that's why some people see fairies and ETs and some people don't, because they're able to conceptualize those other dimensions, because their own inner, because we're all stargates. Every single human is a stargate. Every part of nature is, because everything has access to the multidimensional body. But in terms of Earth, this period is all about the opening up of it, because it was seeded as an ascension planet that got attacked.
Mhm.
And the progression has to do, like I said, with learning the right use of power, which goes back to the tree of knowledge, which is really about our DNA and not about Adam and apples. And I mean, I think that symbolism holds a lot, and I'm not saying that those guys didn't exist, because they did. But the best way that we can understand it without externalizing it to some mythology in the past is to understand that when our DNA strands are turned on, for every strand that gets turned on is another ability to see a different dimension. And the Earth is doing the same thing, going from 3D to its potential of 12-dimensional and beyond. And it's really exciting to know that this is in front of us, because even if we've had a happy life, it's going to be unbelievable. If we've had a miserable time, there's a lot to look forward to.
So do you have a time frame in mind, and from your experience or your opinion with everything you see happening in the world, when are we going to see some concrete changes toward a lot of these things we discussed today that's going to be more on a mainstream level?
I think it's starting to really happen, and I think it's going to continue to increase. I feel by 2017, 2020, we're going to have things a lot more anchored and a lot more where the mainstream or the power structures have completely altered themselves, and they've become a whole different kind of system. You know, maybe more soul pods and soul groups, and leadership in smaller sections that have more to do with utilizing people's gifts and abilities. And Michael Tellinger talks about the Ubuntu movement with the no money system. So I think if we're all successful in our missions, this could happen in just a few years, and we're going to be successful no matter what. But if we keep getting delayed with all these attacks, and they keep doing these false flags and compromising things, like they have been, because justice isn't really happening, or they find some other way around it, even though they're being called out. They're very tricky and sneaky. But the reptilian mindset actually can't handle spontaneity. It's all based on plans that they've had for a long time. That's why they're really scared of what we're capable of doing, because we're very spontaneous and inventive and quick. But yeah, I think by 2025, we're going to notice that we've achieved victory. We've already achieved it in our consciousness on a mass scale, but physical energy moves a lot slower than consciousness. So I think it's going to take maybe till 2020, 2025 tops for the physical to really catch up to where we can look at each other and say, oh my gosh, the world has changed, and it's purifying and it's cleaning itself. And there might be some people that blast into a higher earth energy much quicker, and there might be some that stay stuck for a lot longer. But I think as far as the majority goes, and the mainstream, it's already begun, and we're very close to seeing the results for sure.
And Pluto and Aquarius will probably, I don't know if that's where you're getting some of that, some of your opinion, but Pluto and Aquarius should usher in kind of a revolution as well in the next decade, I imagine.
All right, when Pluto moves out of Capricorn, yeah, that's going to be amazing. It seems like we're, transforming the structure of Saturn, and gutting it, and like doing the whole alchemical thing. And then, thank God, I just love that Aquarius follows Capricorn, because it's such a different energy. And yes, the Aquarian age and that Pluto energy, and that's a total unity consciousness basement.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little about what you and Dr. Dream are up to these days, and where we can, where our viewers can find out more about you, and maybe some of the events that you have coming up that you mentioned briefly in the beginning.
Well, my website is cosmic-gaia-sophia.com, soon to be lauraeisenhower.com, for anybody who's like, God, that's a long one, the other one. You can find me on Facebook, Dr. Dream, touroflove.com. We have an event next weekend in LA. We're going to be posting about it. The details aren't in yet. We have the SETI Ranch, August 14th, 15th, and 16th. And we're going to be updating our website. So there's all sorts of things I might be missing. But if you look at touroflove.com, you'll see his schedule. Mine is going to be updated this weekend. And I pretty much post regularly on Facebook, so you can keep up with everything I'm doing there. And you can find me under Laura Eisenhower or Laura Magdalene. I have 2 accounts. And
when's this book coming out? What's the book called?
Well, the original name was the Grail of Venus. And I'm playing with, something about return from the underworld. And hopefully it's going to be out by, January. And it's going to be in 2 sections. Part of it's going to be the personal stuff. my own personal journey. And the second part is going to be very much about, Gaia and Gaia-Sophia, the mythologies, the exopolitics, the, and how all this intertwines. And then just some tidbits of, wisdom and just things that we can work with to help us through these times. So hopefully it won't take too much longer.
Great. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on Awaken and Power TV with me today. And I'll be following your work, and hopefully we'll have you out here, you and Dr. Dream out here before too long again.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful. I look forward to sharing more soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Awaken and Power TV. Join us next week as we speak with another incredible guest who is working tirelessly to change the world.